Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to topic 15. In this topic, we're going to be talking about the VRay Geometry Settings as well as Render. Now, in this topic, you guys will be seeing what the different settings are and how does it affect it in the render. So before I start, guys, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just switch on an interactive render. And you guys will automatically see how this whole thing is basically looking. Now, let me explain to you guys what is looking and why is it looking in a certain way. As you guys can see over here, the first thing that we can see is that because of the mesh clipper, it's actually becoming quite translucent. We can actually see what is happening inside over here. So when I select this, you can see that it's going to select the clip that it is, which is basically here. So you can see this is the mesh clipper. And when I open up the mesh clipper, you can see that it's enabled. When I de-enable it, you can actually see that it completely goes away. It is not being seen at all. So if you add a mesh clipper and then you disable it, it is going to become completely transparent. Alright, so you can see when I bring that back, it looks something like this. Now you can see when I switch off the effects light, then you can see the lights are not being affected by it. Then you've got the clip lights. So if I deactivate that, also you've got the use object material. So if I add that, because it's default material, it's actually not going to be seen. And you've got material ID. You can see if I change that, there's really no difference because the material is none. I can actually add various different materials to it. You can see that, and automatically it's going to change accordingly. So this is a good way to actually add a mesh clipper to some place. Now let's say I delete that mesh clipper. This is how it comes back. It's going to become a normal wall. Alright, so this is what we were basically creating. Now I'm just going to delete that wall from there in general like this. Just going to make it open up. Now let's go a little bit closer towards, first of all, the infinite plane. As you guys can see, it basically creates an infinite loop like this. Completely, you can see it's all white everywhere, and that's basically what this infinite plane does. Now remember one thing, guys, that the infinite plane is this, and we cannot really edit anything with the infinite plane. So if I delete this off, you can actually see how it's just gone away, right? So that's basically what that infinite plane is, because sometimes you don't want this gray and this very this bluish look. You actually want the whole thing to look something like this. Alright, so that's basically the infinite plane. Now when I come closer to this particular material, as you guys can see, we can actually see that the fur is but it's coming in the downward direction. So let me select the fur over here, and you can see we have multiple different options over here. But before that, if I go into texture, or if I go into distribution, or if I go to variance, you can see how many different kinds of things are being seen. So remember, the first thing is that since it is being seen in the opposite direction, I'm actually going to have to flip this along the blue direction to actually bring that whole thing up, so we can see it over here like this. This is actually where we'll be able to see a much more clearer view of the whole material. And what I would also do is, so that it's more understandable to us, I'm actually going to change the color of the material a little bit. Now I'm actually going to add, let's say, a different material, a different color. So I can add that, and now I can actually reduce it, maybe make it a little bit lighter, like the color should become a little bit lighter, something like that. Okay, and yeah, that's what I think it should look like. And once it's done, we can just zoom in a little bit, and I can actually start to change this color a little bit like that. Let's go into VRay Geometry. Here you guys will start to notice that we can actually see the entire fabric, something like this. Let's say I increase the length. You can actually see the length of this simply kind of increasing over here. Now what I want to do first of all is I want to actually add a different look to it. I want to give it a lighter look, but it's not converting to a lighter color. So what am I going to do if it's not converting into a lighter color? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into the materials over here, and we're going to switch off the diffuse material, so you can see it turns into red first of all. And over here I'm actually going to change out that particular color. So I'm going to get that color the way I want it, and it's going to be seen over here, something like this. Now when I zoom in, you can actually see that, you can actually see how it's looking, right? A little bit more clear, a little bit more better. And over here you guys can see the thickness, so I can actually increase the length of this so it becomes even longer. Then I've got the thickness of this, so they become thicker. That'll make more thicker bands. You can actually see this becoming thicker. You can actually see them become very thick also over here, like that. You can see how thick these are becoming, right? Then you've got the gravity. The gravity is basically, do you want them to be -4? These are going to be very, very straight, like as straight as they can be. And with gravity, they actually kind of tend to fall a little bit, right? So you can see how they are basically tending to fall a little bit. So this is basically how you guys are going to start to create the particular thing that you want. Then you can see over here we have got bend. So if I increase the bend, so you guys will start to see how the entire the entire strands are really bending and really giving that entire look to us the way we really want it, right? So I can reduce this length as well. Thickness is fine. We've got the scale. How much do you want it to scale? So you can actually see how much it's just scaled up enormously, just something crazy like that. You can actually see how it's completely scaled up over here 36 times, and just really really thick, to give that very thick look to it. You can actually see the scale over here. It's really big, right? So we can actually adjust this whole thing in a way that we want it. Then you've got the map channel. So if I change the channel, you'll actually see very slight differences, but not that much over here, because this is just the map channel. Next we've got the curl, guys. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reduce the bend so it starts to straighten up a little bit. So you've got something like this, and then now you've got curl. So if I switch on curl, you'll actually see these things starting to curl a little bit, and the minute I increase this, you'll actually see them starting to curl. Let me just increase that. But if you see, this is a curl radius, but if there's no number only, how will there be a curl, right? So let's increase this curl. Yeah, now let's increase it even more, and the length, and let's keep this thickness less. Alright, but at the same time you need to kind of give it a little bit of gravity so that it can actually take into the curls. And you can actually see how this whole thing is starting to look with all these different elements of ours that we are giving. You'll see I've increased the number of curls completely, so it's just starting to curl up like that everywhere. At the same time, if I reduce the taper as well as reduce the bend, you guys will start to notice that it looks more better. Yeah, we're able to get, you can see with this it's looking something like that, and when I increase it, the complete curls start to take place. So they just get all wrinkled up like that. You can see that difference happening, right? Straight, and then with the curls, you got a lot of the curls happening. So these are some things that you guys can add. And you can see the knots that we have here. If you want to add a lot of knots, so then the whole thing becomes very, very knotted, very, very, irregular. But that's how really things look, that's the kind of level of detail that we want to give. But when we switch it off, of course the level of detail reduces. When you switch it on, the level of detail will definitely increase, and you guys can see various different things. So all of these things are going to kind of make slight changes. We don't really need to know each and everything in general. Only when we start actually working on some of them is when we'll be getting into a lot of the details. But this is basically how you can create a very proper fur object, or whether it's a blanket or it's a towel, or whether it's a bed sheet or whatever it is. You can completely look very nice the way it's supposed to look, and you can completely get that in the shadow as well. Now at the same time, you guys can see that this is not looking anything like this, but the proxy is making it look very, very, very very small size, so it's easy to work around with and easy for SketchUp to move around in. So that's basically how you're going to add infinite plane, how you can use mesh clipper, how do you use fur, and what is import and export proxy. So that's it, guys. We have actually completed the 3 main tabs, and in the next topic we're actually going to be getting into the render settings, and how do you actually do the render settings, what includes in the camera settings and the render settings, and finally what are the different render outputs. And we'll be seeing that in the coming topics before we get into our first project. Take care, guys. I'll see you guys in the next topic.